I was wrapping up my shift at Cedars-Sinai, wiping down the last of the monitors, trading my scrubs for civvies, when my phone buzzed. The sky outside had that peculiar late afternoon haze that only a Los Angeles May drizzle can bring, and my Tesla Model 3 sat silent in the valet lane battery at 20%. I hesitated before answering. My mother rarely called on weekdays, especially not after my big move to LA 5 years ago. "Hello," I said, voice still taut with the adrenaline of back-to-back codes. Her voice, when it came through, was unnervingly composed. "Maya, sweetheart," she began, genteel measured, too measured. "We'd like you home for dinner next Friday at 6. I'm making your favorite baked ziti with that handcrafted Italian sausage you loved as a girl." I felt a tingle along my spine. Baked ziti. I hadn't tasted her version since before my promotion to charge nurse, before I'd refinanced my condo in Venice Beach to fund my small investment in that duplex on Abbot Kinney. "Why the sudden invite?" I asked, shifting my weight against the hospital's sleek white walls. She paused, and I could almost hear her inhaling carefully as though rehearsing each word. "It's important," she said. "Your father and I have news that concerns the entire family. Please just be there." Then she hung up. My heart thudded, not at the prospect of eating baked ziti again, but because important in our house had always meant something's wrong. It was the same tone she used when Dad came home from the auto plant in Detroit 40 years ago to tell us they were moving across the country, or the morning she told me Dad's health insurance wouldn't cover his latest surgery. I closed my eyes and pictured the Victorian on Ocean Avenue white clapboard gleaming in the salt air, wind chimes tinkling on the porch. I pictured Ryan and Kyle, my twin brothers, 30 years old each, with his half-hearted gig economy hustle, Ryan still debugging that failed wellness app, Kyle pretending to be a celebrity chef on his Lyft shifts. They'd both lived off our parents' generosity since College Weekly Cash App deposits their electric bills on my autopay. Meanwhile, I had scraped and hustled UCLA's RN program loan, late-night shifts, 10-hour weekends until I could afford that Tesla. I slipped out through the double glass doors and tapped the Tesla's fob. Its dashboard blinked 20% remaining, and I sighed. It would be a stretch to drive all the way to Santa Monica in one charge. I could Uber, but the call had rattled me. I wanted control. So I tucked the fob in my pocket and headed for my bicycle by the valet stand, another choice my brothers had mocked as too crunchy, and pedaled toward home. Pedaling through the soft rain, LA looked nothing like the dried-out desert image most people imagine. Palm fronds glistened, streetlights shone through mist, and the aroma of rain-damp citrus drifted from backyard trees. My mind churned through possibilities. Had Dad's refinery pension finally given out? Were Ryan and Kyle in debt over that seed fund fiasco? Or worse, had they loaned themselves my investment capital and lost it all? I arrived at the Corner Cafe on Lincoln Boulevard, our family brunch spot back when we still laughed Sundays away over sidecar donuts. The sign was dark. They'd moved to a wholesale model. Everything familiar was fading. I unlocked my bike and rode the last block in silence, steeling myself for Friday. Friday couldn't come soon enough. 2 days later, during my weekly coffee break, my colleague Jennifer from finance leaned in. "Big news," she whispered, eyeing my furrowed brow. "You look like someone told you your 401k evaporated." I laughed, shaken. "Family dinner. Mom said there's important news." She raised an eyebrow. "You still paying their mortgage?" I shrugged. "Until next week." She frowned. "Be careful. In LA, love and money mix about as well as oil and water." I stared at her old-fashioned drip coffee, remembered how every dollar I'd sent had plugged the holes in their sinking ship. On Friday evening, I'd demand answers or walk away for good. That night, I barely slept. My dreams were haunted by the clatter of dinner plates and my parents' hollow thank you, the stale taste of unfinished grudges. I woke early Saturday, straightened my scrubs, and volunteered for an extra shift. Better to keep busy than stew in dread. The week passed in a blur of codes and chart reviews. Every time I thought of my parents' words, important news, my palms grew clammy. I ordered new tires for the Tesla, keyed the navigation to their zip code, and recharged both battery and nerves. On Thursday afternoon, while I was charting vital signs, my phone buzzed again. It was a text from Mom Dress Business Casual. Park in the driveway. No hearts, no hugs, just instructions. I stared at the words, wrestled with the silent accusation they carried. My suit jacket lay on my bed, waiting. Friday arrived with a soft, salty breeze and a sky the color of mother of pearl. I locked the Tesla outside their gate and walked up the ivy-clad path. The front door swung open before I could knock. My mother stood there, pearls gleaming, lips tight. My father's face behind her was pale and drawn. They looked ready. "Come in," she said. I stepped onto the porch, the wood creaking under my heels, and smelled that baked ziti, a blend of sweetness from San Marzano tomatoes and earthiness from fresh basil. The dining room lights glowed golden, but the table was bare, except for a single envelope at the center. My heart seized. I swallowed. "You said dinner." My mother lifted the envelope, placed it deliberately in front of me. "This is dinner." My breath caught. The envelope was thick, legal size. Had they already typed their will? I felt the room tilt. My gaze flicked to Dad, to the shadows behind him, to the rain-spattered window behind the buffet. They both nodded, once resolutely. I raised a hand to steady myself on the back of a chair. "What is this?" My father cleared his throat. "We have finalized our estate planning." His voice had that indefinable weight, the same one he used decades ago when he told me he'd sold our family car to pay his own tuition. "We want you to read it." Time slowed. The envelope seemed to pulse under the table's glass surface. My mind raced. They'd cut me out of the inheritance, gave the house to my brothers. Or worst of all, locked me into another lifetime of bailouts. I clenched my jaw. My pulse hammered so loud I was sure they could hear it. I forced my voice even. "May I open it now?" My mother's eyes shimmered. "Whenever you're ready." I lifted the flap. My fingertips grazed the crisp paper within. Then, with a breath that felt like the final moment before a plunge, I nudged the envelope open and froze. Inside lay a single line in my father's perfect, loopy script. "All real estate assets effective immediately will transfer exclusively to Ryan and Kyle. No provision has been made for Maya." My world snapped. My hands trembled. I tasted acid at the back of my throat. I'd poured every cent, every ounce of myself into keeping this family afloat, only to find myself erased in a blink. I dropped the envelope. Its papers fanned out like dying leaves. The chandelier overhead caught the raindrops on the window and scattered them across the ceiling. I swallowed hard, knuckles white on the glass table. My mother's voice cut through the silence. "We thought it was only fair." I stood height, stretching taller than I'd ever felt. "Fair," I echoed, voice low and steady. "You call this fair?" They exchanged a glance, calm practiced. And in that moment, the girl who'd once pedaled to their brunch spot on a rain-slicked morning realized that tonight she would either break them or finally break free. Outside, the wind picked up. The door clicked behind me. My first step toward the next move felt like walking on ice. I didn't look back. The envelope lay behind me, its final brutal verdict. My hands still trembled when I closed the heavy front door behind me. Rain spat against the pane as I leaned my forehead against the cool glass heart hammering like a freight train. That single line in Dad's elegant script, "No provision for Maya," had cut deeper than any surgical incision. My chest felt hollow, as if every ounce of blood had drained away, leaving only ice. By the time I reached my Tesla, I was already dialing my bank's app. In the dim light of the dashboard, I stared at the auto-pay tab for my parents' mortgage, $200-300 every month, straight out of my account. My thumb hovered over cancel payment. My breath came in shallow gasps. Would this ruin them? Yes. Would I feel an ounce of regret? Not yet. I tapped confirm, and the screen flashed green. Auto-pay canceled, successful. That click was my first act of rebellion and relief. Months of sending checks of sleepless nights fretting over their sinking finances had gone unappreciated. Tonight, I reclaimed control. The Tesla hummed softly as I slid into the driver's seat, the seat's memory foam embracing me like a loyal friend. I punched in the valet lane pin, too tired to navigate rain-slicked streets, and closed my eyes for a moment, tasting freedom. Next on the list, health insurance premiums. My father's supplemental plan ran about $300 a month, another ghostly anchor I'd been towing for years. I pulled out my phone, found the insurer's mobile portal, and tapped Remove Dependent. A warning popped up. Removing will affect coverage immediately. My pulse spiked. I paused, envisioning Dad's wrinkled face when he discovered the policy gone. But I swallowed the lump in my throat and tapped Yes. Within seconds, the portal confirmed the change. The needle of guilt tried to prick me, but I forced it down. In our culture, we're taught to honor our elders, to shoulder burdens without complaint. But my family had taught me something darker, that sincere devotion could be twisted into expected debt, a family loyalty that felt more like indentured servitude. Tonight, that ended. I drove home through Westwood in near silence, the wipers swishing like a metronome against the storm. Neon signs glowed through the rain. Late-night pharmacy open 24/7. Taco, but each bit of light felt distant, as though I'd woken from someone else's life. I replayed the dinner scene in my mind, Mom's composed mask slipping as I read, No provision for Maya. The flicker of her pearl necklace and that final icy calm in her voice. We thought it was only fair. Back in my loft, I sank onto the suede couch and let out a long, ragged breath. My heart still pounded. I slid off my heels, peeled off damp socks, and felt the grain of the oak floor beneath my bare feet. This apartment, 3 years of sacrifice and extra shifts, was mine. No one could touch it. I perched on the edge of the coffee table, phone in hand, and opened my notes app. A bare bones list stared back. 1. Cancel autopay mortgage, done. 2. Remove health insurance, done. 3. Review any other shared expenses. Next. I tapped on shared expenses and scrolled through old emails, dinner reimbursements, grocery drags, even a $150 Netflix gift card they'd claimed as family movie night contribution. My lips curved into a thin, ironic smile. I could crush a spreadsheet here, but spreadsheets wouldn't soothe the ache inside me. I needed a plan, something decisive. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Jennifer. Hey, saw you sprint out of the hospital. Everything okay? I stared at her name, my ally in the finance department who'd once slipped me a discount on Tesla charging. I typed back family drama, mortgage stuff, then need advice, coffee within seconds, be there in 10. I pulled on jeans and a sweater, grabbed my umbrella, and headed downstairs. The lobby was quiet, the elevator's chrome walls reflecting my steely expression. On the walk to our coffee spot, a corner of the Ivy, a real LA staple, I thought about twist logic. They'd gambled my loyalty as though it were theirs to trade, forgetting that I held real power now. Jennifer was already at our booth, latte in hand, eyebrows arched. Tell me everything, she said, her voice low. I recounted the envelope, the will, my cancellations. She shook her head. That's bold, she said. You're basically forcing them to sink or swim. You sure you're ready for the fallout? I stared at my foam heart in the latte, swirling like a quiet storm. I've been drowning in their emergencies for years, I said. If they wanted fairness, they should have written me in from the start. Jennifer nodded, then slid me a card. Contact my brother, he's with Roth and Associates. Estate planning. If you want to contest that, you'll need backup. I tucked the card into my pocket. A lawyer's name was as chilling as a scalpel, but at least it offered leverage. I stood up, leaving the latte half-finished, and felt a surge of clarity. I wasn't just reacting, I was strategizing. That night, I drafted an email to Roth and Associates. My fingers hovered over send until I remembered the third character in our drama, my own integrity. Could I pull off a legal challenge without looking vindictive? I edited the tone, highlighting procedural fairness over vengeance. Please review the validity of the will. I suspect improper influence. Then I clicked send. The next morning, while charting vitals in ICU, my phone buzzed with a reply. Let's discuss. I'm away at a conference in Santa Monica, but can meet Thursday at 2 p.m. My chest tightened. A Thursday meeting meant 2 more days of uncertainty of waiting. My mind tumbled through worst-case scenarios, a countersuit family law drama in Beverly Hills, public messy, a media circus. During lunch, I walked to the rooftop garden for fresh air. The city sprawled endlessly, sunrise glinting off the Pacific. A double rainbow arched over Santa Monica High School playground, an unexpected symbol promise after storm, hope after betrayal. I paused beneath it, closed my eyes, and made a silent vow I would see this through whatever it took. Back in the ICU, monitors beeped, ventilators sighed. A patient's oxygen sat at 88%. I bent to adjust settings focused on saving lives, compartmentalizing my own crisis. But every beep echoed in my chest as a metronome counting down to Thursday's showdown. That evening, I returned home and found a FedEx envelope on my doormat, no return address. Inside lay 2 pages of the original will and a brief note in Dad's handwriting. Meet us at the house Friday at 6 p.m. We need to discuss your conditions. My breath caught. They'd heard about my actions. They were calling my bluff. A knot twisted in my stomach. Was this a peace offering or a trap? Part of me felt a stab of betrayal, an ultimatum they'd never offered when I needed them. Another part felt the familiar surge of adrenaline. This was high-stakes chess. I pocketed the note and stared at the rain-streaked window. Outside, a streetlight flickered. The tension coiled in my chest like a spring. I was caught between 2 worlds, the hospital where I saved lives by the book and the family battlefield where only ruthless strategy prevailed. Thursday's meeting loomed 2 days to brace for impact. I closed my eyes and pictured the rainbow again, a promise not of reconciliation, but of clarity. When I met that lawyer, I wouldn't waver. I would show them that the independent daughter they tried to erase was the only one with the power to save them. And as the wind howled outside my loft, I realized this was no longer just about inheritance. It was about self-respect, about rewriting the rules they'd imposed on me for 3 decades. Friday at 6 would come soon enough, or else I'd redefine their entire world on my own terms. The next text I received was from my father, "Don't disappoint us." My phone buzzed, and I stared at the screen, heart pounding in the dark. I parked my bike outside Roth and Associates just as the clock on the glass door flicked to 2:00 p.m. My heart pounded like it did when I'd raced down Ocean Avenue in the rain. Inside the lobby smelled of polished mahogany and faint coffee, nothing like the antiseptic scent of Cedars-Sinai. I checked my phone, no new texts. My father's last message, "Don't disappoint us," still glowed on the screen. Ms. Roth greeted me in a quiet office lined with legal tomes. She was in her mid-50s, silver hair, pulled back eyes sharp behind tortoiseshell frames. "Maya," she said, "let's talk candidly." I nodded, sinking into the high-backed leather chair. The polished wood desk between us felt like a jury bench. She slid 2 copies of the will across. The same envelope I'd opened at my parents' house lay reprinted here. It detailed their real estate assets, transferring everything to Ryan and Kyle. I caught a faint tremor in her voice. "Have you discussed undue influence with your parents?" she asked. My chest tightened. "They're insistent." "It was fair," I said. Ms. Roth tapped the document. "But California law requires the testator's free will. Your cancellations of mortgage, auto pay, and insurance could be construed as coercion." My throat seized. Coercion me. I was supposed to be the victim. I swallowed. I simply stopped being their bank. She raised an eyebrow. "In legal terms, if a beneficiary, especially a caretaker, takes actions that financially harm the testators, a court could view your actions as exerting pressure." I bit my lip. The twist logic stung my retaliation might undermine my case. Ms. Roth closed her eyes briefly. "We need more evidence." She handed me a pad. "Document every call, every text. If you can show they approached you first asking for money after the will, you'll strengthen your claim." I wrote furiously phone logs, dates, amounts. A plan formed. I'd subpoena bank records, compile a timeline. After an hour, I left with a stack of notes and a folder labeled Estate Dispute, Confidential. The rain had eased to a drizzle. LA's light filtered through palm fronds. I pedaled back toward Venice Beach, mind racing. I was no stranger to risk, but this felt like navigating a legal minefield. At home, I drafted emails to my bank requesting statements for the past 6 months. My fingers hovered over send until I added a final line. "Please expedite processing. Legal dispute pending." I hit send. Then I texted Jennifer, "Gather any email threads you have about my family payments. Create a PDF." She replied immediately on it. I paced, my loft eyes drifting to the window where the midnight blue sky met the sea. A seagull cried in the distance, a solitary symbol of freedom taunting me. The weight of what I'd done pressed down, canceled their lifeline, threatened their home, now threatening their inheritance. My moral compass wavered. But I remembered that final verdict. We thought it was only fair. I clenched my fists. Fair not when I'd built my life on sacrifice. Late that evening, my phone chimed. A text from Kyle Maya, "Meet me at Dad's garage in 20. Urgent. No, please, just urgency." The garage was over in Santa Monica's industrial zone, a squat cinder block building where Dad tinkered with his vintage Chevy. I grabbed my coat and left before I could second-guess it. I arrived to find Kyle pacing among toolboxes, shadows flickering under harsh fluorescent lights. He looked drawn, baggy eyes, 5 o'clock shadow. "Maya," he said, voice low, "they're panicking. Mom's already telling neighbors the house might go into default next week." My stomach flipped. Default. "You mean because I canceled autopay?" He nodded. "They didn't expect you to act so fast." He pulled out his phone and showed a notice of default published by the county recorder. 3 days until auction. My pulse thundered. They'd filed a notice of default, a public shaming that would ruin their credit and reputation. My retaliation had unleashed a far more dire consequence than they'd bargained for. I closed my eyes, picturing their Victorian on Ocean Avenue letters taped to the front door warning passersby. Kyle swallowed. "They're furious at you, but they're also desperate. They want to renegotiate the will." Mom called a lawyer friend in Beverly Hills. I felt a twinge of guilt for the first time, guilt mixed with vindication. They'd cornered me, and now I'd cornered them. I took a breath, the cold air stinging my lungs. "So they want a bargain," I said. He nodded. "Yeah. They're offering you a 30% share in the Venice duplex if you withdraw the suit and reinstate payments." The twist, they were dangling a bribe, my own property, a share of my precious duplex. My mind raced through logic. If I accepted, I'd be legally bound not to pursue the estate claim. I shook my head. "That's blackmail, Kyle." He looked away. "It's negotiation, sis. You know how they work." The faint hum of an idling car outside rumbled beneath us. It felt like the engine of their collapsing world. I checked my watch, 10:30 p.m. I'd spent all day drafting subpoenas and gathering evidence. Now I faced an ultimatum. The risk of letting the house go to auction, the risk of a protracted legal battle, the risk of severing my only family ties forever, each threatened to spiral out of control. I glanced down at my phone. A message from Ms. Roth. "Review default notice carefully. You may have grounds to rescind default if you show irregularities in filing." That was my lifeline. Irregularities. The county recorder often made clerical errors, especially on rainy days. If I could prove a date mismatch or that notice wasn't served properly, I could halt the auction. I clenched my jaw. This conflict had become a high-stakes gamble, financial ruin for them, legal ruin for me, or total estrangement. But I wasn't about to let them threaten me with my own investments. "Okay, Kyle," I said, voice firm. "I'll hear them out, but on my terms. I won't accept any deal that compromises my legal claim or my independence." His shoulders sagged. "They'll be at the house tomorrow, 6 p.m., he said. "They want you there." I nodded. "Fine. But I'll bring Ms. Roth's office my own counsel. No more games." He hesitated, then gave a small, resigned nod. "See you tomorrow." As I biked back through mist-shrouded streets, I felt the tension coil tighter. My mind churned through all the twists my own legal threat could be dismissed as coercion. The default notice might buy time if I found a filing error. My parents were willing to barter my own property, and Kyle, caught between loyalty to me and to them, was a wild card. I pulled into my driveway, heart racing. Above me, a single street lamp cast a halo over my loft. The humming of the Tesla charging outlet sounded like an urgent heartbeat. I stepped inside, locked the door, and pressed my back against it, breathing hard. Tomorrow at 6 p.m., I'd stand in that grand Victorian dining room again, this time with my lawyer by my side, ready to call every bluff. I ran my fingers over the scar above my right eyebrow, a souvenir from a childhood bike crash, and felt a surge of resolve. I'd broken free once. I'd break through any obstacle my family threw at me. But as I turned off the lights, my phone buzzed one more time. It was a calendar invite from my father, meeting 6 p.m. Friday. Add Ms. Roth as attendee. I stared at the invite in the dark, adrenaline mingling with dread. They knew I'd brought counsel. They were setting the stage for a showdown. The storm outside intensified, thunder rolling over the Pacific, rain rattling the windows. In the dim glow of my phone, I realized I was no longer fighting for money. I was fighting for my dignity, my autonomy, and the truth. And when dawn broke, nothing would be the same. The Mercedes pulled up under the old oak tree as twilight deepened its headlights, slicing through puddles. I climbed out, Ms. Roth at my side, clutching her briefcase like a shield. The Victorian house loomed, window panes glowing gold against the gathering storm. I tightened my collar business. Casual never felt so stiff, and followed her to the front door where my mother stood, pearls and composure in equal measure. My father hovered behind her, arms crossed, jaw set. Ryan and Kyle waited just inside the foyer, faces pale. We entered without a word. The foyer smelled of lemon polish and damp wool. Upstairs, the dining room was transformed, the chandelier-dimmed chairs pushed neatly around the long mahogany table, and in the center, the default notice and 2 thick file folders. My mother motioned us to sit. My brothers sank in opposite ends, uneasy. Ms. Roth took the seat to my right, her posture unreadable. My mother cleared her throat. "Thank you for coming," she said, voice like porcelain. "We've reviewed your conditions. We've spoken to our attorney in Beverly Hills, Mr. Grant. We'd like to propose a solution." She tapped the folder in front of her. "We are prepared to amend the will. You'll receive a 25% share in the duplex on Abbott Kinney, plus full payment of the insurance premiums you canceled. In exchange, you'll drop legal proceedings and restore mortgage autopay." My pulse thundered. They were offering me my own property back only a fraction, like a reward for obedience. I inhaled slowly, feeling the old anger coil. Ms. Roth spoke first. "Before we discuss amendments, we must address the default notice. We've found that it was filed without proper service." My mother's lips tightened. Dad shifted. I peered at the notice, its embossed county seal mocking me. "You filed this yesterday," I said. "How did you expect me to respond?" My father's shoulders sagged. "We needed leverage," he admitted. "We thought urgency would bring you back to the table." Leverage. The word tasted bitter. I glanced at Ms. Roth. She opened her briefcase and produced a stack of corrected filings, emails from the recorder's office, confirming a clerical mistake in the service address. "This notice is void," she said softly. "No auction can proceed unless service was proper." Relief flickered through me like dawn. The power had shifted. My mother snapped the folder shut. "That was never our intention," she said, voice faltering. We only wanted fairness. Kyle's eyes glistened. Fairness. You erased me from my own home, Mom. He stood, rage trembling his voice. You thought you could scare her into submission. I won't stand for it. Ryan rose too, voice low but firm. She didn't coerce you. You coerced her. Heat flooded the room. My parents exchanged panicked glances. I felt something like pity, but steel hardened my heart. I stood, smoothing my blazer. I'm willing to consider a fair amendment, I said, voice calm. But the terms cannot include threats or invalid notices. I want 50% of the duplex insurance paid retroactively and full reinstitution of mortgage payments for another 6 months to protect your credit. Silence stretched. Then my mother shook her head. That's too much. The duplex isn't worth that much. I let a faint smile touch my lips. It's worth exactly what my lawyer valued at $1.2 million. 50% is a fair market share. Dad's face went pale. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Ms. Roth laid down additional documents, appraisal reports, rental income statements, and mortgage records. My parents leaned forward, reading in disbelief. You've done your homework, my mother whispered. I nodded. I've spent every night preparing. I won't be gaslit. My mother looked at me no longer as a child, but as an equal adversary. Why won't you just let this go? She asked, voice breaking. We're your parents. The room felt smaller, the chandelier flickering in the stale air. I felt tears prickle, then blinked them away. Because you framed my independence as a crime. Because you gambled with my life and then expected gratitude. Kyle's hands clenched. Mom, Dad, look at yourselves. You're choosing a courthouse over a family. My father sank into his chair, guilt etched in every line. Ms. Roth cleared her throat. I'll prepare an amendment reflecting Maya's terms. You can review and sign. She snapped her briefcase shut. For a moment, the only sound was the rain thrumming against the windows. Outside, lightning forked across the sky, a jagged promise of chaos. My mother's eyes brimmed. Dad met my gaze, shame curdling in his expression. Then, unexpectedly, the chandelier above us flickered and went out, plunging the room into darkness. A heavy clunk echoed behind me. I spun hard in my throat. The back door, normally locked, stood slightly ajar. Through its gap came a shaft of pale moonlight, and the silhouette of a figure I hadn't expected, Jennifer's brother Robert, stepping in, umbrella dripping. He held up a manila envelope. Sorry to crash your family dinner, he said, voice steady. I found something you need to see. I swallowed, shock and relief tangling in my chest. The envelope felt cold in my hand. Thunder rolled outside and the air tasted like ozone. My mother's gasp echoed through the dark room. I tore it open. Inside was a copy of the original deed to the Venice duplex signed over by my parents 2 years ago with no mention of me. Alongside it, a property lien from last month filed by an unknown creditor for $200,000. My blood ran cold. They'd secretly transferred my asset to themselves, hidden a lien to trap me. The worst betrayal yet. I looked up, eyes blazing. You lied, I said. This is fraud. Robert stepped forward. I thought you should know before you sign anything. His gaze flicked to my parents, then to Ms. Roth. The lawyer exhaled sharply. This changes everything. Lightning cracked overhead, and in that flash, every secret lay bare. I felt the room tilt, trust shattered, future uncertain. And as the storm raged outside, I realized our battle had only just begun. My fingers trembled as I held the forged deed and lien notice, the paper's edges sharp against my palm. The chandelier's crystal droplets scattered the golden light into fractured patterns on the dining room walls, symbols of my family's fractured trust. My mother's gasp echoed, her painted nails digging into the edge of the mahogany table. My father's face was ashen lines of shock and shame, carving new wrinkles. Kyle sank into his chair, head in hands, while Ryan stared at the documents as if they'd suddenly become radioactive. Robert slipped forward, umbrella dripping onto the oriental rug. "This lien was filed last month by Crestview Capital," he said quietly, sliding a printout across the table. "They're claiming Dad took a $200,000 high-interest loan against the duplex without your knowledge." I leaned in, heart pounding. The twist logic unfurled. They'd secretly pawned my property to a predatory lender, then tried to trap me with empty shares. It was a betrayal so cold it felt like frostbite. I exhaled slowly, tasting the acrid tang of fury. "You did this to me," I said, voice low. "You thought you could corner me into accepting a worthless deal." My mother's eyes flickered to Ms. Roth, whose expression was suddenly grave. "Maya, Ms. Roth said softly, "fraudulent conveyance and usurious lending practices are both grounds to void those transactions." I straightened, summoning the calm I used in the ICU when a code blue spiraled out of control. "Then let's void them." I turned to my parents. "Explain yourself." My father's voice cracked. "We thought we were protecting our home. The mortgage was underwater, and Crestview offered quick cash. We panicked." Kyle's head popped up. "Panicked? You gambled with her future, with my sister's independence for quick cash." He slammed his fist on the table. The crystal chandelier rattled. Ms. Roth opened her briefcase and laid out a folder of letters, emails, and bank statements. "We'll file a petition to rescind the lien on the basis of undue influence and usury. We'll also challenge the deed transfer as a fraudulent conveyance since it occurred after you expressed intent to include Maya." My parents exchanged a terrified glance. I felt a surge of vindication, but also exhaustion. The stakes were sky high. If we won, my property rights would be restored. If we lost, I risked a public legal battle that could ruin them and me. I swallowed and looked to Robert. "What about the default notice?" He smiled grimly. "The county recorder confirmed the service error. The notice is void as of this afternoon. No auction will proceed." Relief rippled through me like sunlight-piercing clouds. I allowed myself a moment of gratitude. Robert's evidence had saved the day. Then I squared my shoulders. "I want a formal agreement drafted tonight. No more secret loans, no more false deeds. We'll settle all debts transparently. If you violate it, I'll file for fraud and injury to my rights." My mother reached out, tears brimming. "Maya, please, we're sorry. Let's not destroy the family." My heart pounded. Torn between compassion and justice, I remembered months of sleepless nights, the weight of carrying their crises. "Family isn't built on lies," I said. "It's built on trust and respect. Right now, trust is broken." I paused, voice softening. "I'll agree to help refinance the mortgage one last time under my terms. Then we start fresh." Kyle exhaled relief and sorrow mingling in his eyes. "Sis, thank you." Ryan nodded, wiping his own tears. The room's tension shifted, but before any relief could settle, my phone buzzed. I checked the screen, an unknown number labeled ACO Auction Services. My blood ran cold. I answered. A crisp voice said, "Ms. Johnson, this is Jenna Carter from ACO. We've reissued a notice of default for the Venice duplex sale scheduled tomorrow at 10 a.m. I swallowed hard. "What?" But the notice was void. Her tone was sympathetic but firm. "Our records indicate a new lien filed by Capital as Loans. That loan's claim is valid until contested in court." I glanced at my parents, their faces drained. My throat tightened. "Capital as Loans." Robert stiffened. "That's another predatory outfit." Ms. Roth's eyes narrowed. "They must have filed after Crestview's notice. We need an immediate injunction." I pressed my palm to the cool table, the wood grain a lifeline. Tomorrow at 10 a.m., less than 12 hours away, I had to block the auction, clear the lien, and finalize our agreement. The storm outside, intensified rain drumming against the windows like urgent applause. The chandelier's crystals shimmered, then dimmed as the power flickered. In that half-light, I felt the weight of this high-risk gamble victory meant reclaiming my legacy and exposing my parents' betrayal. Defeat meant losing everything I'd built: my home, my independence, my faith in family. I looked at my mother. "We'll settle this at dawn." Then to Ms. Roth. "What do we need for the injunction?" She stood snapping her briefcase closed. "Emergency filing in Los Angeles Superior Court. I'll handle it. You find any docs on Capital S loans and bring them to my office by morning." I nodded, adrenaline surging. My parents and brothers watched hope and dread mingling in their eyes. As I turned toward the door, Robert fell into step beside me. He offered a USB drive. All the loan docs I could pull: signatures, timestamps, contact info. I pressed it into my hand. The hallway lights flickered. The antique mirror at the end reflected my determined face. I took a steadying breath. Tomorrow would be a crucible: legal petitions, courtroom drama, and the final reckoning of our family's debts. My phone buzzed again, a text from Kyle. "I'll help with paperwork. Love you." I allowed myself a small, grateful smile, then looked back at the darkened dining room. The chandelier, once fractured light, now hung silent. Outside, thunder rumbled, promising more turbulence. I stepped into the storm, the USB in one hand, my resolve in the other, knowing that when sunrise came, everything would change. Dawn light filtered through my blinds as I bolted upright in my loft heart, hammering like a drum roll. The storm had passed, but outside Los Angeles still glistened wet palm fronds, jeweled with raindrops, street lamps reflecting in puddles. I splashed cold water on my face, dressed in a sharp navy suit, and grabbed the USB drive Robert had given me. In the kitchen, I spread out the loan documents, lien notices, deed history, and emails Kyle had printed overnight. Every page felt like a bullet I was loading into my case. By 7:30 a.m., I was pedaling my bike toward Los Angeles Superior Court, the USB clutched in my pocket, Ms. Roth's emergency filing forms in my backpack. My lungs burned in the chilly air, but I welcomed the sting. It grounded me. Courthouse steps rose ahead, flanked by palm trees still dripping. Suits and ties milled around me, but I focused on the prize, halting the auction set to sell my duplex at 10 a.m. Inside, the clerk's office was chaotic. A line of lumbering families waited to file restraining orders, estate filings, divorce papers. I approached the window marked Emergency Motions and handed over my application, supporting declaration, and the USB drive. The clerk frowned at the stack, then at the clock. "You're cutting it close," she muttered, eyeing 8:45 a.m. "Judge Thornton hears emergency matters at 9. I nodded, offering a crisp printed check. She stamped the filing received 8:47 a.m. and pointed me to the courtroom across the hall. My palms went slick as I crossed the marble floor, past towering pillars etched with friezes of blindfolded justicia. In courtroom 12B, bailiffs stood at attention. I spotted Ms. Roth already conferring with a court reporter, her briefcase open on the lectern. At the back, my parents' attorney, Mr. Grant, stood talking with Crestview's counsel, slick, dark-suited men who looked like they'd made their fortunes on high-interest loans and foreclosure auctions. Their calmness made my skin crawl. The bailiff's voice echoed, "All rise." Judge Thornton presiding. The judge entered, late 50s, salt and pepper hair spectacles perched on his nose, and settled behind the bench. He peered over the top expression, unreadable. Case number 9A2678, Estate of Johnson versus Crestview Capital et al. Emergency motion to vacate notice of default and suspend sale. He paused, then looked at me. "Plaintiff's counsel, you may proceed." Ms. Roth rose gracefully, briefcase in hand. "Your Honor, on behalf of Ms. Maya Johnson, we move for an immediate injunction to enjoin the sale of 672 Abbott Kinney Venice Beach on grounds of improper service, of notice of default, fraudulent conveyance, and usurious lending practices. We submit evidence." She handed him a USB and a binder. Specifically, exhibit a county recorder email confirming notice served to the wrong address. Exhibit B, Crestview's promissory note with 28% interest, clearly usurious under California law. Exhibit C, deed transfer, recorded after the original will date, demonstrating fraudulent conveyance. Exhibit D, lien filed by capital S Loans last night, asserting a second undisclosed loan. Judge Thornton tapped through pages on his computer. His gaze hardened. Opposing counsel, Mr. Grant rose, voice oily but firm. Your Honor, our clients acted in good faith. Notice was served per code, and Ms. Johnson's cancellation of mortgage auto pay, her own actions, precipitated the default. Furthermore, the deed to the duplex was voluntarily conveyed by the testator prior to any challenge. We deny fraud. As for the secondary lien, capital S is a bona fide purchaser. He gestured to Crestview's counsel, who nodded. My chest tightened. This was the twist logic Mr. Grant was blaming me for the default. Ms. Roth leaned in. Your Honor, on the auto-pay argument. Ms. Johnson's actions were in response to her parents' exclusionary will not to coerce payment. Under Probate Code Section 21380, a creditor cannot enforce a claim that arises from undue influence, and the deed conveyance occurred after that will was executed. The judge raised a hand. He cleared his throat. Counselors, I've reviewed the USB evidence. The recorder's email does show misaddressed service. The lien by capital S appears to have been filed at 11:02 p.m. last night, only minutes before your motion raising questions of good faith. I will grant a temporary restraining order halting any sale or lien enforcement until a full hearing. That hearing will be set for 2 weeks from today. Both parties will submit briefs by Monday. Relief flooded me so fiercely I thought I might weep. My chest loosened. Ms. Roth exhaled and gave me a small, supportive nod. Across the courtroom, I caught my parents' eyes wide with gratitude and fear. My brothers looked stunned but hopeful. Judge Thornton continued. However, plaintiff's counsel be advised the court expects full documentation by Monday. Opposing counsel may challenge the order with a motion to dissolve, which, if granted, would reinstate the sale. This is not permanent relief. His gavel tapped. Court is adjourned. I sank into the nearest bench, hands pressed to my knees. The hum of voices washed over me, bailiffs, lawyers, clients. Outside, a group of protesters held signs, "Stop predatory lending and keep families safe." Their chants drifted in, mixing with the courthouse din. It felt surreal, like I'd stepped into a new chapter of my life. Ms. Roth found me in the hall. You did well, she said quietly, handing me the binder. But Monday's deadline is tight. We need everything. Bank statements, loan officer emails, proof of auto-pay cancellations, confirmation of will execution date, and affidavits from the recorder's office. I nodded, adrenaline returning. I'll be at your office at 7 a.m. Meanwhile, my parents approached. My mother's eyes glistened. Maya, she said, voice trembling. Thank you. Her pearls caught the fluorescent light. My father's hand brushed mine. We made a terrible mistake. I forced a small, weary smile. We're fixing it together. Kyle and Ryan slipped in beside me. Kyle clapped my shoulder. Sis, that was badass. Ryan chuckled. Next time, we'll bring coffee. I laughed, heart lighter than it's been in months. For a moment, the family felt whole again, united by crisis, and now by survival. That evening, I returned to my loft and emptied the binder on my kitchen island. The clock ticked past 10 p.m. Emails, bank, PDFs, recorder, affidavits, each was a piece of armor. I texted Jennifer and Kyle early, start tomorrow. Check your inbox. They replied with thumbs-up emojis. As I drafted my to-do list, my phone buzzed. An email from my bank flagged urgent in red. My eyes skimmed. Notice your conduit loan for 3100 Sunset BLVD. Approved at 4.5% fixed, will close Thursday. I blinked. My application for a third property had been approved unexpectedly. It was the opportunity I'd dreamed of, diversify beyond the duplex and build real financial independence. My chest tightened with excitement and dread. This new loan would bind me to a major debt obligation just as I was fighting my parents' battles. Could I juggle property acquisitions while waging a legal war? The risk felt enormous. One misstep could collapse my real estate ambitions and my family's fragile reconciliation. I glanced at the framed collage on my wall, a childhood photo of me in pigtails on my bike. Dad's proud grin, Mom's gentle laugh. That memory felt worlds away. Now I stood at a crossroads, pursue my own empire, or devote every ounce of energy to this family feud. The apartment lights flickered as the city hummed outside. I closed my eyes and let the moment stretch, breathing in the smell of rain-damp concrete, adrenaline, and possibility. I reached for my phone and typed a message to Ms. Roth. We need to talk strategy for the new closing. Can we meet at 6? Seconds later, my phone dinged with her reply. Absolutely. Tomorrow night after briefs. I exhaled. Tomorrow would bring Monday's deadline and that property closing Thursday. 2 battles, 2 showdowns. My life had become a high-stakes balancing act between loyalty and ambition, family and self. I flicked off the lights and stared out at the city skyline, skyscrapers aglow like a constellation arranged by my own hard work. And as sleep crept in, I knew the true measure of this fight wasn't winning or losing. It was proving that independence and compassion could coexist on my own terms. But when my alarm blared at 6 a.m., I'd find a third text waiting, this time from an unfamiliar number, simply reading, "Meet me at 5 tonight." I have evidence they're planning a last-minute modification of the will. My breath froze. Another twist was coming, one that could topple everything I'd built so far. Dawn found me back in my loft, head swimming from last night's win in court, and the weight of that new property loan approval buzzing in my veins. I stared at the pale blue sky, creeping through the blinds, heart pounding like a helicopter. Yesterday, I'd halted the auction, but today I faced Monday's deadline: assemble every shred of proof by noon, or the injunction could dissolve. I grabbed my laptop and coffee, dark roast, no cream, and opened the folder Ms. Roth had sent. Bank statements, recorder, affidavits, loan officer emails, deed, timestamps, a mountain of documents. By 7 a.m., my kitchen looked like a command center. Kyle and Jennifer arrived half asleep, but determination flickering in their eyes. I handed Kyle a stack of envelopes. These are notarized affidavits from Crestview's former clients about usurious rates. He nodded, feeding them into the scanner. Jennifer sorted emails. Here are the confirmations of autopay cancellation, April 12th at 2:03 p.m. system log attached. Her fingers flew. I watched the clock, 8:15. Outside, LA's traffic hummed like an indifferent crowd. At 9, I zipped through my wardrobe, business casual on top, running leggings underneath, and hopped on my bike, heading to Ms. Roth's office. The wind whipped salt spray from the coast, tangling my hair into knots. I pedaled faster, mind ticking through my opening brief. I'd lead with flawed service of default notice, follow with fraudulent conveyance, then finish on usury. I rehearsed the words as stoplights flashed. Your Honor, the evidence incontrovertibly shows. By 9:45, I burst into her sleek Beverly Hills suite, glass walls, modern art papers in hand. She looked up, coffee cup at her side, and offered a tight smile. Good. We have 90 minutes to polish and file. We spread our materials across her marble table, scan, annotate, compile. Every line of text became a weapon. Interest rates over 25% recorded after hours. Deed transfer signed March 3rd, 2 weeks after the will, dated February 15th. Default notice served to an old Venice address, not the mortgage address on file. By 10:55, the supplemental brief was ready. We logged into the court's electronic filing system, fingers trembling as Ms. Roth uploaded the 50-page document. At 11:02, a confirmation pinged, filing accepted. My pulse raced. We had 5 hours until any challenge could arrive. 5 hours to breathe and to prepare for Thursday's property closing. Outside her office, the LA sun glowed fierce, mirroring my mix of triumph and exhaustion. I thanked Ms. Roth and pedaled back home, resolving to celebrate dinner with something other than instant noodles. But halfway through Pacific Coast Highway, my phone buzzed a text from an unknown number. Meet me at the Old Venice Pier at 5 p.m. I have proof they're planning a last-minute will modification. My blood turned cold. I glanced at the ocean steel gray Restless. A third player had entered the game. Back at the loft, I paced among stacks of papers. My mother hadn't spoken to me since court. My last text, "We'll settle this by noon, okay?" No reply. Betrayal still stung, but I had to stay focused. I messaged Kyle and Jennifer Peer at 5. Be ready. Neither responded immediately. I sent the same to Ms. Roth. Later, her quick reply, understood. Discretion paramount. The afternoon blurred, final emails, client calls, a head rush of tasks. At 4 p.m., I pulled on a waterproof jacket and grabbed my bike back to Venice Pier. The sunset burned orange over the Pacific gulls wheeling in the breeze. I spotted a solitary figure leaning on the railing. Mr. Harrison, our original family lawyer, looking every bit as out of place as he'd been at that first will signing. His face was drawn eyes wary. "Maya?" he said, voice low. "Thank you for coming." My heart thumped. "You said you had proof?" He nodded, pulling a manila folder from his satchel. "I've been reviewing your parents' drafts. They intended to file an amendment tonight, adding a clause to redirect your share to a trust managed by Ryan. Meaning even if you win, you won't control your share." My stomach lurched. The cunning twist they'd try to trap me even after conceding. I ran a hand through my hair. "So they're preparing a new will behind my back." He exhaled. "Yes. They're meeting an attorney at midnight to finalize it. You have to stop them." I looked out at the sun-splashed waves, beautiful, indifferent. But if I interrupt that meeting, it could look like intimidation. He shook his head. "The law allows you to contest any amendment made under duress, but you need evidence of intent before signature. This folder has notes from the draft witnesses' emails scheduling the midnight meeting, even a calendar invite they forgot to delete." My mind raced midnight amendment, a fresh twist just hours before Thursday's closing. I needed to alert Ms. Roth and my parents. "We can file another emergency motion," I said. Harrison frowned. "Judge Thornton granted only one TRO. A second could backfire, making you look litigious." The risk was real. My heart pounded. I closed my hand over the folder. Then I need to confront them directly tonight. If they see me with this evidence, maybe they'll back down. He hesitated, then slid another envelope across. "Sent this to Ms. Roth. It details everything. Draft clauses, email, trails, timestamps. Hand it to her before midnight." My breath caught. I'd have to split my time court prep in the morning, confrontation at home at midnight, and property closing the next day. It felt impossible. I tucked the folder into my jacket and thanked him. The pier lights twinkled. The horizon stretched vast and dark. I felt small, like a lone gull buffeted by an incoming storm. I pedaled home, aware that tonight I would cross a dangerous line, pitting myself directly against my parents, not just in court, but in the intimate battleground of home. At home, I found Kyle waiting, laptop open. He stood and hugged me, relief and resolve in his eyes. Jennifer tapped away at a tablet printing exhibits. "I saw Harrison," I said, laying the folder on the kitchen island. "They're plotting a midnight will amendment to cut me out again." Kyle's face hardened. "Then let's stop it." Jennifer looked up. "Ms. Roth said any second filing risks your credibility." I nodded. "So we need to force them to renegotiate, no tricks." Time ticked toward evening. I called Ms. Roth. "I have new evidence will amendment scheduled at midnight. I'll bring you the folder at your office by 11. She replied, "Understood. Be careful. They might not welcome the confrontation." I hung up, feeling the familiar coil of adrenaline. At 10 p.m., I donned my navy blazer and drove to Santa Monica Gateway, the shopping complex, where Mom had booked the attorney suite for their midnight meeting, a glass front conference room overlooking the mall fountain. The valet took my Tesla. I walked in, heart hammering. The elevators chimed. On the third floor, a sign, Conference Room B, Johnson Family Estate. I pressed my palm to the door, steeling myself. Inside, my parents and Mr. Grant sat in high-back chairs glowing from laptop screens. My mother looked weary. Dad startled to see me. Mr. Grant closed his laptop with a practiced flick. "Maya," he said smoothly. "I was wondering when you'd arrive." I drew the folder, breath steady. "I know about the amendment." My mother's eyes welled. "This isn't necessary." Dad rose, hand trembling. "Please, Maya, let's just sign tonight and end this." I stepped forward, voice calm but firm. "I won't sign anything unless you all agree to a transparent settlement. No last-minute tricks." Mr. Grant cleared his throat. "Your Honor can consider amendments more than once, but you risk litigation costs." I glanced at my parents. Shame and fear flickered across their faces. The fountain lights below pulsed in the darkness, a beacon of hope and danger. I opened the folder. "Here are the draft clauses, email invites, witness statements. If you proceed, I'll have to file for undue influence again. You know the law." My mother's shoulders sagged. "We don't want more conflict." Dad nodded. "We're sorry. Let's finalize what we agreed in court." A tense silence fell. Then the door behind me clicked. I spun. Ms. Roth stood there, briefcase in hand, eyes unwavering. "Need a witness?" She entered, placing the envelope on the table. Mr. Grant's jaw clenched. The air crackled. My heart hammered. The stage was set for a final showdown, midnight negotiations between blood and law. Outside, the fountain's water rippled like whispered secrets. I glanced at my parents. Would they truly surrender their last gambit? The lights in the conference room seemed to dim as every soul held its breath. I inhaled the scent of polished wood and fear. Then Dad exhaled, voice breaking. "We agree. No amendments tonight." Before relief could settle, my phone buzzed a text from an unknown number. "They're meeting again at 2 a.m. You've only postponed the storm." I looked up, pulse racing. Another secret meeting, another twist waiting in the wings. The sun hadn't yet risen when I returned to my loft, exhaustion and adrenaline warring in my veins. I'd thwarted the midnight amendment, secured my parents' promise to renegotiate fairly, and by 2 a.m. held a final briefing with Ms. Roth in her quiet office. We'd confirmed the court wouldn't allow further amendments without full hearings, and that any attempt would void the will entirely. I'd watched my parents sign a revised agreement, 50% share of the duplex in my name, insurance debts, cleared mortgage payments, reinstated for 6 months, and felt the last threads of betrayal snap. Yet as I pedaled through empty streets back home at 4 a.m., I realized this battle was more than property. It was about rewriting how we treated each other, about proving that respect must be earned, not demanded. At dawn, I stood on my balcony overlooking Venice Beach, the ribbon of highway glinting with morning light. My phone buzzed, Ms. Roth's confirmation our injunction would remain until the 2-week hearing, giving us breathing room. I exhaled, sipping strong black coffee, and allowed myself the faintest smile. My brother's texts flew in. "Kyle, dinner tonight for real family time. Ryan, congrats, sis. Proud of you." My parents hadn't replied, but I knew they would soon. I needed to call them, not with demands, but to rebuild trust. By 9 a.m., I was at Cedars-Sinai, charting vitals and running rounds. Saving lives came naturally. Family had always felt like more dangerous surgery. Yet as I checked on an elderly patient who reminded me of my grandfather, I saw in his weary eyes a longing for dignity. I realized my fight had given me the same dignity restored through hard-won justice. After my shift, I slipped out to meet Jennifer at a cafe near the hospital. She slid me a printout confirmation of my loan closing on Schedule A, my third investment property, a duplex in Silver Lake financing, approved closing next week. My real estate portfolio was now 3 strong: Venice, Santa Monica, and Silver Lake. That evening, I invited my parents and brothers to dinner at my apartment, a simple homemade baked ziti garlic focaccia and old family photos projected on the wall. Their faces lit by the glow, I felt a swell of cautious hope. My mother's eyes brimmed. My father's voice trembled as he said, "We're proud of you." Kyle toasted to Maya, the boss. Ryan laughed, and for the first time in months, our laughter rang true. Yet beneath it, I sensed the fragile promise of this new beginning. Weeks later, the injunction hearing arrived. In Courthouse 12B, Judge Thornton reviewed our briefs, including the midnight amendment evidence. Opposing counsel looked forlorn. As Ms. Roth delivered our closing, this family had faced the consequences of deceit. Now the court must enforce the fair will. The judge nodded, pen clicking. I find in favor of Ms. Johnson. The amended will stands as signed at midnight, and no further challenges may be filed. The injunction remains until the date of probate. Relief flooded me. Victory was once more mine, but this time it felt earned. Back outside, the sky was a crisp blue. My parents hugged me, tears and smiles mingling. My brothers flanked us, genuine pride shining in their eyes. The mural of Venice Beach on the courthouse wall loomed behind us, a reminder that families like waves crash and rebuild, sculpting new shores. Months passed. My Silver Lake duplex closed, and a modest 2-unit building in Echo Park followed. My passive income climbed. I finally felt the weight of financial freedom I'd always dreamed of. My career thrived, promotions, leadership roles, even invitations to speak on healthcare panels about work-life balance. But the richest reward was in my living room, the laughter of my family dinner gatherings, honest conversations. We'd learned the hardest way that love without respect is a house built on sand. One Saturday afternoon, I biked to the Venice Pier, my ritual spot, to clear my head. Seagulls, cod, surfers paddled beneath swells that caught the sun like scattered gems. I watched the tide come, in each wave a reminder that life like the sea offers constant renewal. My phone chimed a message from Ms. Roth, "Your probate confirmed. Titles recorded. Congratulations, counselor." I smiled, fingers tingling with triumph. Just as I pocketed my phone, a familiar figure emerged from the crowd. A young real estate investor I'd met at a networking event, eyes bright with opportunity. He approached, offering a business card. "Maya Johnson. I've been following your story. I'd like to discuss a joint venture on a mixed-use development in downtown LA." My heart skipped. Another deal, another chapter. I shook his hand, feeling the spark of new ambition. As he spoke of locations and ROI, I glanced back to the water's edge, waves crashing, retreating, reshaping the shore over and over. Families change properties, change hands, but the core remains resilience, integrity, and the courage to ride the tides. I pocketed the card and stepped onto the wooden planks of the pier, the ocean breeze tugging at my hair. The horizon stretched, endless and inviting. My phone buzzed again, an email notification, subject line, "Urgent county litigator seeks meeting unrecorded easements on Abbott Kinney property." I froze, heart racing. Unrecorded easements. Historical water rights. Another shadow from my family's past threatening to surface. I closed my eyes, inhaled the salt-kissed air, and gripped the railing. Life had taught me that every victory invites a new challenge. Every calm conceals another surge. I looked toward the horizon, pulse steadying. I would face this next wave just as I'd faced them all. Because if there's one truth I'd learned, it's that real independence comes not from wealth, but from the strength to keep moving forward even when the tide turns again. I stared at the email subject line until the words blurred. Urgent county litigator seeks meeting unrecorded easements on Abbott Kinney property. My fingers tightened around my phone as tourists streamed past me on the pier, their laughter a sharp contrast to the ice spreading through my chest. Unrecorded easements. In real estate, those two words together spelled disaster, hidden claims that could invalidate ownership, rendering years of investment worthless. I speed-dialed Ms. Roth, pacing between the weathered pier posts. She answered on the second ring. "Maya, you sound stressed. Check your email. County litigator. Easements." My voice came out clipped professional, the same tone I used during medical emergencies. A pause. The sound of keyboard clicking. Then, Jesus. Okay, I see it. Historical water access rights dating back to 1892. Someone's claiming the duplex sits on a public easement for beach access. Her voice sharpened. This could be catastrophic if it's legitimate. My knees weakened. I gripped the pier railing, watching waves crash against the pylons below. What does that mean, practically? It means someone, possibly the city, possibly a historical preservation group, could force you to demolish or relocate portions of the building, or pay massive compensation. We need to meet with this county attorney immediately. I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar weight of crisis settling on my shoulders. Just when I thought I'd won my independence, another battle emerged from the shadows of bureaucracy. "Schedule it," I said. "Tomorrow morning, if possible." That evening, I canceled dinner plans and spread county maps across my kitchen island, tracing property lines with my finger. The duplex sat just 3 blocks from the beach on what had once been a marshy inlet. In the 1890s, before Venice was developed, fishermen and local tribes had used these waterways for access to the Pacific. If those access rights had never been formally extinguished. My phone buzzed. Kyle's face appeared on the screen. "Hey, saw you missed dinner. Everything okay?" I considered lying, protecting him from this new crisis. But the months of legal battles had taught me something about family secrets were what nearly destroyed us. "There's a problem with the duplex. Historical easement issues. I might lose it." A long silence. Then, "What do you need?" Such a simple question, but it stopped me cold. For years, I'd been the one asking that question of my parents, my brothers, everyone who needed rescuing. When had anyone last asked what I needed? "Research help?" I said finally. "Historical records, old city planning documents, and maybe," I hesitated, "maybe just someone to sit with me while I figure this out. I'll be there in 20 minutes. True to his word, Kyle arrived with a laptop, a bag of takeout Thai food, and a thermos of coffee. We worked until 2 a.m. pulling up digitized city archives, old surveyor maps, and property deeds dating back to the 1880s. What we found was both encouraging and terrifying. The good news, the easement had been formally vacated in 1924 when the city built the current Venice Boulevard. The bad news, the vacation had been improperly recorded, leaving a legal gray area that a skilled attorney could exploit. "So you're not necessarily screwed," Kyle said, rubbing his eyes. "But you're not in the clear either." "Story of my life?" I muttered, then immediately felt guilty. Kyle had stayed up all night helping me, never once complaining or asking for anything in return. "Thank you," I said, "for this, for everything these past months." He smiled, tired but genuine. "You know, I used to resent how successful you were. The Tesla, the properties, the way Mom and Dad bragged about you to their friends. But watching you fight for what's right, I get it now. You earned every bit of it." The next morning, I met with County Attorney Rebecca Martinez in a sterile conference room downtown. She was younger than I'd expected, with sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and a reputation for being meticulous but fair. "Ms. Johnson," she said, sliding a thick folder across the table. "I'll be direct. The Coastal Commission received a complaint about illegal development on historically protected waterways. Your property came up in our research." She opened the folder, revealing aerial photos dating back decades. "These images show your duplex was built partially on what should have been preserved public access." My stomach dropped. But the easement was vacated in 1924. The vacation was incomplete. The city council voted to vacate, but the proper paperwork was never filed with the county recorder. Technically, the easement still exists. Ms. Roth leaned forward. What's the remedy? Martinez's expression softened slightly. That depends on Ms. Johnson's cooperation. We could pursue demolition and restoration, which would be costly for everyone involved. Or, she paused, we could negotiate a settlement. Partial easement recognition, public access hours, perhaps a small portion of the property returned to public use. I felt my real estate empire teetering on the edge of a cliff. What would that look like practically? You'd deed the front 10 feet of the property back to the city for a walking path. In exchange, we'd formally vacate the easement on the remaining land and grant you clear title. You'd also pay a modest settlement, say $50,000, to cover our legal costs. $50,000. Not devastating, but not trivial either. More importantly, losing 10 feet of frontage would reduce the property's rental value significantly. I closed my eyes, running calculations. I need time to consider this, I said. Of course. But Ms. Johnson, Martinez stood. Don't take too long. The complaint came from a well-funded historical preservation group. If we can't reach a reasonable settlement, they'll likely file suit directly. That could get much more expensive for you. Outside the county building, Ms. Roth and I sat on a bench in the plaza, watching office workers hurry past with their coffee and briefcases. It's not the worst outcome, she said carefully. You keep most of the property, gain clear title, and the settlement is manageable. I nodded, but my chest felt hollow. I thought I was done fighting. I thought I'd finally built something secure. You have, she said firmly. One easement dispute doesn't erase everything you've accomplished. You have multiple properties, a thriving career, and a family that respects you. That's more security than most people ever achieve. That afternoon, I drove to Silver Lake to check on my newest duplex. The tenants, a young couple and an elderly artist, greeted me warmly. The artist, Mrs. Chen, invited me in for tea and showed me her latest paintings, watercolors of Los Angeles landmarks, including one of Venice Beach. You know, she said, handing me a delicate cup of jasmine tea. I used to walk along those old waterways as a child, before they built all the buildings. There were herons and fish, and you could see clear to the mountains on sunny days. I studied her painting, waves lapping at a pristine shoreline unmarked by development. Do you think some things are more important than property rights? She smiled, weathered hands steady as she poured more tea. I think balance is important. Progress and preservation. People need places to live, but they also need places for their souls to breathe. That evening, I called Martinez and accepted the settlement terms. The decision felt right, costly, but honorable. I would create a small piece of public access, preserve my investment, and move forward with clear title. 3 months later, the easement settlement was finalized. The front portion of my duplex property became a lovely walking path with benches and native plants. To my surprise, the foot traffic actually increased the desirability of the remaining rental units. I raised the rent slightly and found myself ahead financially despite the settlement costs. More importantly, something had shifted inside me. The old Maya would have fought the easement claim tooth and nail, viewing any compromise as defeat. But this Maya, the one who'd learned to balance fierce independence with family loyalty, who'd discovered that true strength sometimes meant knowing when to bend, understood that some victories come through grace rather than force. 1 year later, I stood again on Venice Pier, but this time I wasn't alone. Kyle had gotten engaged to a teacher he'd met at a coffee shop. Ryan had finally launched his wellness app, which was gaining modest success. My parents had moved to a smaller condo in Santa Monica, partially downsizing, partially accepting that their children were adults with their own lives. We gathered monthly now for family dinners, but the dynamic had changed. We split checks, shared hosting duties, and talked openly about money and boundaries. The Victorian house had been sold, the proceeds helping to secure my parents' retirement and my brother's new ventures. My real estate portfolio had grown to 5 properties across Los Angeles. I'd been promoted to chief nursing officer at Cedars-Sinai. Most surprisingly, I'd started dating a fellow investor I'd met at that networking event on the pier, a quiet man who understood both ambition and family complications. As I watched the sunset paint the Pacific in shades of gold and rose, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Sunday dinner at our place. Your father wants to try making his grandmother's lamb recipe. I smiled, typing back. I'll bring wine and dessert. The old Maya would have seen that invitation as a potential trap, a sign that they wanted something. But this Maya recognized it for what it was, an olive branch, an invitation to continue building something new on the foundation of something broken but repaired. The waves crashed against the pier pilings below, eternal and patient. Each wave erased the previous one's mark on the sand, but the beach itself endured, shaped by countless tides, into something both permanent and ever-changing. I pocketed my phone and walked toward my Tesla parked in the same spot where this whole journey had begun. The battery showed 85%, plenty of charge for wherever the road might lead next. As I drove through the familiar streets of Venice past the duplex with its new public walking path where evening joggers and dog walkers meandered peacefully, I realized that the greatest victory hadn't been keeping my property or reforming my family's dynamics. The greatest victory had been learning that sometimes the most radical act of independence is choosing consciously and carefully when and how to remain connected to the people who matter most. In the rearview mirror, the pier lights began to twinkle on guiding ships safely to shore. Ahead, the road stretched into the dusk, full of possibilities I had earned the right to explore, not as someone fleeing from the past, but as someone who had made peace with it. My phone rang as I pulled into my driveway. An unknown number which once would have filled me with dread. Now I answered calmly. Maya Johnson speaking. Ms. Johnson, this is David Kim from Pacific Coast Developers. I have a proposition that might interest you. I smiled, turning off the engine. Whatever challenge or opportunity lay ahead, I was ready for it. The woman who had once been erased from a will now owned her own story, every chapter, every plot twist, every hard-won page. And the story was far from over.